Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Public Service, the 2023 William Donald Schaefer Policy Conference and Award Luncheon. Of course, this is a celebration of the legacy of William Donald Schaefer, who was city councilman, city council president, mayor of Baltimore, governor of Maryland, and Comptroller of Maryland, and above all, a citizen of Baltimore and Maryland. Let's hear for William Donald. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. It's great to see everybody in person again. See a lot of old friends, and I do mean old. Sorry. And a celebration of the outstanding public service legacy of William Donald Schaefer. My name is Mike Golden. I'm the vice chair of the Schaefer Center for Public Policy's Board of Advisors. Currently, I also serve as the director of external affairs for the Maryland State Retirement System. And I'm going to take advantage of my position because I'm retiring at the end of this year. So let's hear from me. I also had the honor of serving as assistant press secretary during William Donald Schaefer's first term as governor, and then later as his press secretary during his 2 terms as comptroller. And you know what? I'm still serving him. It's a lifetime commitment, like public service. You've heard lots of stories about Governor Schaefer, and among them were, whenever he would have staff meetings, he would remind us constantly that we were here to serve. He would say, and I quote, "It's one word, helping people." Now think about that. We never corrected him. Exactly. So as comptroller of the staff, when he was comptroller, and Christine Feldman sitting there at the table right there, we were inspired to create something called Schaefer Service when interacting with the public. And this is in the comptroller's office, but I think it's something that probably should be applied statewide. And, he would tell us at these staff meetings regarding Schaefer services, always take the extra step to help people, especially those who call the comptroller's office with a problem not directly related to that office. For instance, if somebody called in and said, I'm having trouble, or my water got cut off, rather than us saying, well, that's not our department, and blowing them off, he encouraged us to take that case on, and follow up till its resolution. And I think that's our calling. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. We even had coffee mugs made, and it's real when you have a coffee mug. And on it had some of his admonitions, if you will. And the ones that I like, I don't know if you can see it from there, but it says Schaefer Service. And, but he would say, respond to people, listen to their hearts, show that you care. And the one that I like the best is consider they may be right. Because sometimes they are, Well, I am your MC for today, for better or worse. My first order of business is to bring greetings on behalf of our board chair, Bob Douglas, and the members of the Schaefer Center Advisory Board. Unfortunately, Bob can't join us today, but he has an excuse. He's out of town celebrating his daughter's wedding. So I think this is being recorded, and he may see this, so let's show some enthusiasm. And I'd like to ask my fellow board members to please stand and be recognized. You're over that table, right over there. Do you recognize any of them? The topic of our conference today is, as I said in the very beginning, is the future of public service. And we have a very exciting lineup of presenters today. Our conference will be followed by an award luncheon where we will bestow upon Dr. Carla Hayden the prestigious 2023 William Donald Schaefer Award. We are excited to welcome a host of civic officials, many of whom benefited greatly from Governor Schaefer's mentorship. Joining us this morning, I'm not sure if they're here. No? None of them? Well, forget them then. We'll introduce them later. Also joining us are a host of former cabinet and elected officials scattered among the crowd here. We also like to welcome the faculty, administrators, staff, and students from the College of Public Affairs. Let's hear for the College of Public Affairs. And a special welcome to the current candidates in the Schaefer Center's Maryland Certified Public Manager Program and student interns of the Schaefer Center's Next Gen Leaders for Public Service Program. Can they stand up? Can you stand up? Got to be shy, don't be shy. Now, it says here I'm supposed to mention this, and I don't know why, but the hashtag for today's conference is hashtag SCPPConf 2023. I don't know what that means, but I said it. So I would like now to turn the podium over to Dr. Ann Cotton, who's the director of Schaefer Center, and I'll vamp a little bit while she's making her way to the podium. She has a few things to say, as you would expect. Ann?
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Mike. And thank you for being MC today.
My pleasure.
Welcome, everyone. We're here today for the Future of Public Service. I'm the director of the Schaefer Center for Public Policy, and I have the best job in the world. One of the things that I get to do is train the next generation of leaders with our fabulous Schaefer Center graduate fellows who are sitting in the back. They should stand up. The other thing I get to do is train our current public sector managers through the Certified Public Manager Program. I won't make you stand up again. You did it once, but you're on call for lunch. And then we have our new Next Gen Leaders for Public Service Program, which I'm going to talk about a lot at lunch, but it's a fabulous initiative to link our students at the University of Baltimore to the careers in public service. Young people today have a passion to make a difference, and we're here to help them do that. And I'd like to recognize Pat Mikas, our new Next Gen manager of our Next Gen Leaders for Public Service Program. Pat is the one who is connecting our University of Baltimore students to these wonderful internship opportunities and also mentoring them along the way. And she's done a fabulous job. As you'll hear more at lunch, we've placed 79 students in internships since September. Wow. And these are all paid internships. So these are students going into state, local government agencies, community development organizations. They're there to make a difference. They get to apply what they're learning in class and see that it actually really is something, and it really does apply in the real world. And they get that opportunity, and then when they leave, they have an experience to put on their resume so they can demonstrate that not only do they have academic knowledge, they've actually done the work. And for lots of these students, it's the pathway to their career. And for many of us that started our careers with internships that are now in public service because we started there and continued, this is what we want, and we want to continue the legacy of William Dowland Schaefer. And I'd like to recognize Emily Bolton from the Volcker Alliance. Where's Emily? I'm just sitting there. Emily wins the award for the longest commute today. She's the executive vice president of the Volcker Alliance, and she came in this morning from New York to speak today on our panel, and I really appreciate the partnership of the Volcker Alliance with the University of Baltimore and the Schaefer Center in our Next Gen program, which I'll talk about more at lunch. So in 1985, two things happened that are really germane to what's going on today. The first thing is that Ronald Reagan designated the first week of May as Public Service Week. So that was the first Public Service Week, 1985. But a month before that, we were ahead of the game, and the Schaefer Center for Public Policy was founded in April of 1985. So the beginning of great things happened that year. And one of the things that the pandemic has taught us is that people are leaving public service, and people have different expectations for public service. We have a lot of people that are kind of burned out and had retired early. We have lots of people who are thinking that maybe this isn't the place for me. And we need to actually do more to bolster public service. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today, and one of the reasons why we do what we do in the Schaefer Center, because we want to prepare the next generation of leaders to come into those positions. We want to support the people that are in public service with our Certified Public Manager program, our training programs, because there's a lot of opportunity to make a big difference in public service. It's the highest calling that we have. It's how we take care of our fellow man and woman and how we provide for our communities. And it's important and it matters. And it's what we do at the College of Public Affairs. It's what we do at the Schaefer Center. And I'll talk more about that at lunch, but today we're going to be talking about the public service pipeline. We have a great keynote address that's going to talk about public service values and what's needed for future public servants. And I think that you're going to find this is going to be a wonderful day. We have a great celebration at lunch today with Dr. Carla Hayden, as we're going to recognize her with the 2023 William Donald Schaefer Award. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mike.
All right. And just for the record, I'm not retiring because I'm burned out. Some might argue that, I don't know. Oh, wait a minute, I was about to read your comments. Sorry. It's tough, this is a tough job, you know. I'd like to now introduce our keynote speaker. It's my honor to introduce Michael Stahl. I stumbled upon his book a few months ago and got it right here. And I understand that it'll be available and he'll be signing them, at lunchtime? Is that right? This is a great book. You know, I was telling Michael earlier, and I don't favor him because his name is Michael, but it didn't hurt. But other Mike, I was telling him that I started reading this book and it was like a primer for public service. It was like a textbook, if you will, and really caught the spirit of reason why most of us have engaged in public service. And the thing that if you don't mind me reading from your text, I don't have to pay you anything, but it's in the back of the first chapter, I believe it is. He always he notes key points or key concepts made in the previous chapter. Anyway, so the call to public service may come from any number of different sources, but it is a call that offers the chance for meaning in a person's life. It may be a call to do something or to be something. And that to me kind of sums it all up. It is a calling. Once you get a taste for serving the public, there's so much gratitude that you can derive from that. I can't put it into words, I guess, but or as well as Michael would say, but it's a great motivator, and it's as William Donald would ask us at meetings, it's similar to what you were telling me before about the EPA director. What have you done to help somebody today? There's nothing more. I don't think there's anything more noble than that. So that's all I have to say about that. I sound like Forrest Gump. Michael Stahl is a 40-year veteran of public service in the legislative and executive branches in state and federal government in the United States. He has held positions ranging from state probation and parole officer, I'm familiar with that, research assistant to the majority floor leader of the Missouri Senate, directing the distribution of $50 million annually in loans and grants to schools for asbestos abatement, ensuring compliance with all federal environmental laws and working with international partners to solve environmental problems in other countries and regions of the world. He has led organizations ranging in size from 10 to 3,100 employees. He taught for almost 20 years as an adjunct faculty member in the master's program in public administration at George Mason University at their Arlington, Virginia campus. And he began his federal career as a presidential management fellow. He was awarded for the Distinguished Presidential Rank Award by the U.S. government and the Distinguished Career Service Award by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. He has written several articles in public administration, including, quote, Sustaining the Public Service Mentality and, quote, New Imperatives for Public Managers. And most recently, as I said, he is the author of the book, The Promise of Public Service, which will be available, as I said, during a book signing before and after lunch. And free of charge? Wait a minute, do I get reimbursed? I coughed up a lot of bucks, this is not cheap. Sorry. He holds an MPA from the University of Missouri and a leadership coaching certificate from Georgetown University. He is the CEO of Stahl Strategic, a coaching and consulting firm in Staunton, Virginia. I present to you Michael Stahl. Michael.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be back among a group of public servants. I retired in 2015 and don't get out to see that many current public servants, and it's always nice to be among you and to talk about the challenges and rewards of public service. I want to thank the Schaefer Center of the University of Baltimore for inviting me to be your keynote speaker. Congratulations to all of you on your choice to be part of a noble profession with many opportunities to accomplish much for individuals, the nation, and the world. Now, let's see if I can make this work right. There we go. Former President Harry S. Truman had this to say about being a public servant. Quote, "I would rather be an honorable public servant and known as such than to be the richest man in the world." Now, some of us might like the opportunity to test whether we would like to be the richest person in the world versus being an honorable public servant. But as we all know, you will not be the richest person in the world if you spend your career in public service. I wanted to note that it's quite by accident that Harry Truman seems to be wearing the same tie that I'm wearing today. That was a total freak. I don't know how that happened. The reason that I hold Truman in such high regard is that I have a picture of his swearing in after Franklin Roosevelt's death. And he later said about that swearing in that he felt like the moon, the stars, and all the planets had landed on his shoulders. He had been vice president for 82 days when he assumed the presidency, and he had met with FDR during those 82 days for a total of 4 hours. And during those 4 hours, they did not spend any time talking about some of the agreements that Roosevelt had made with Stalin and Churchill, and Truman then had to go off and meet with Stalin and Churchill. And he, I think, ranks as a public service hero, and I've profiled him in the back of my book, as I have about a dozen other public service heroes who've done something really great for the nation and have not necessarily gotten the lasting acclaim that they deserve. Now, around this time, 10 years ago, I was preparing to begin a medical journey that would either correct a cardiac condition known as hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, that used to be called an enlarged heart, or bring my life to a close after 39 years in public service. I was about to have a total artificial heart implanted as a bridge to a heart transplant, which would take a year to match up in the organ transplant system. But the artificial heart worked for me for a year while I went back to work, and I got the call for a heart transplant in late June 2014, now almost 9 years ago. After the transplant surgery, and when it became clear I was going to survive, I thought about how I would use this gift of additional time. I thought about things like travel or renewing various relationships, and then I had the thought that I wanted to write a book that I could not find during my years of pursuing a master's degree in public administration. It would be a book for public service practitioners, and it would combine the best ideas about public management I encountered during my career, and it would also include profiles of some of the people who most inspired me during my many years of reading U.S. history and biographies. I've long felt that profiles like these are an underappreciated teaching tool for students and young practitioners in public policy and administration. In fact, if I have the opportunity to write a second book, it will be a series of 20 or more profiles of American heroes we should all know better. Last year, aided by the COVID shutdown, I finally got around to submitting a manuscript and getting my first book published. That book is available to you today, The Promise of Public Service. And I'm hoping that many of you will come and see me at the book signing table as you line up for lunch, and that you'll be able to talk with me for a bit. I tell you that story about me and my heart transplant not for applause or sympathy, but mostly to pay tribute to the surgeons, cardiologists, nurses, and other staff at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, whose skill and professionalism are the reason I stand before you today, along with the care of my wife, Ann Pontius, who's here today and is also a 30-year veteran of public service. There she is. And I see she's practicing the Queen wave that she saw on the television the other day. So simply put, the promise of public service can be described this way. You take the oath and you get the opportunity. Or if you aren't in government service, and you take the pledge of your organization to serve the public in some specified way. So who are public servants? When people hear the term public servant, they often think of presidents, governors, legislators, cabinet secretaries, agency directors, the people that you see most on news broadcasts or political talk shows. These officials are an important component of our system of governance, deserving of our scrutiny, praise, and sometimes our disdain, but they are only a small portion of the legion of people responsible for governing the nation. The nation's career public servants implement the laws, carry out the programs, deliver the services, and manage the resources that keep the nation functioning. Today, I want to speak especially to the career public servants, as I did in my book. The definition of public service has transformed and expanded over time to include not just those working in government agencies, but to include those working in other sectors. Also, public service is no longer about government, but is about serving a role in governance, much of which takes place outside the halls of government. Public servants include people serving in federal, state, and local institutions such as legislative bodies, courts, and executive agencies, and people serving in advocacy or interest groups like non-governmental organizations or NGOs, and private sector actors in contracting or consulting firms. All of these are part of the field of governance. Public servants receive the opportunity to partake of a higher purpose that will aid their search for what they personally find meaningful in their lives. In return, citizens receive a commitment for conscientious service dedicated to solving public problems. In ancient Greece, the word arete, spelled A-R-E-T-E, referred to excellence of any kind. The arete of something is the highest quality stage it can achieve. For Aristotle, something is excellent when it manifests its own unique purpose, and he felt that human excellence involves the correct use of reason in connection with moral choice. An article in the Smithsonian Magazine stated that the Greeks would have assigned George Washington and General George Marshall to the realm of arete, or virtue, the self-fulfilled and noble accomplishments for the state. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor E. Frankl, there he is, the Viennese psychiatrist, Holocaust survivor, and founder of the logotherapy school of psychiatry. Logos is the Greek word for meaning. He says, quote, "Striving to find meaning in one's life is the primary motivational force in man. He needs the call of a potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled by him," end quote. Frankl had observed that his fellow prisoners in the concentration camps fared better when they had something meaningful in their lives to guide them to survival. For many public servants, this gift of meaningfulness is the principal reason for pursuing a career in public service. In his book, Callings, Finding and Following an Authentic Life, Greg Levoy says the calls may be to do something, or they may be to be something. They may be calls towards something or away from something, to review our commitment to something, or to come back to something in an entirely new way. Calls and the questions they raise provide a, quote, spark of instructive fire. Robert Kennedy, in a speech on June 6, 1968, delivered a speech to students at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, for their first affirmation celebration. And he eloquently described a way in which public servants can view their work. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events, and in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples can build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Something clicked in me when I read those words. During my 40 years in public service, those words were on a framed poster hung in every office that I occupied. The words of Robert Kennedy served as a kind of public service creed for me. Every contribution to improving the well-being of others can be seen as a ripple of hope sent to make things better for individuals, the nation, and the world. Over my years in public service, I began to notice certain attributes of the most effective public servants I encountered. The first of these attributes, idealism. Ideals offered us a standard of perfection or excellence that can serve as the ultimate objective or aim of an endeavor. Ideals are aspirational, sometimes viewed, mistakenly I think, as impractical or beyond reach. But ideals have real value in developing public policy because they serve as important benchmarks to achieving public goals or outcomes. Every one of the 12 public servants I profiled in my book had this attribute of idealism, the desire to improve America in important ways. Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural speech in March 1865 is considered by many historians to be, there he is, to be the best speech ever by a president. With the North's victory imminent, Lincoln chose to use the speech to summon his countrymen to put the war behind them and build a unified nation together. And the words, his speech included these very famous words that most people have heard: with malice toward none, with charity for all, let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and among all nations. Frederick Douglass called Lincoln's speech his sacred effort to keep the Union together. Lincoln was assassinated only 6 weeks later. I believe the next necessary attribute is altruism. It's usually defined as the principle and moral practice of concern for the welfare and happiness of other human beings. Altruists exhibit an unselfish regard for or devotion to the welfare of others. For those in public service, altruism can be a way of giving expression to your compassion or empathy. Frances Perkins, in her work to devise and implement the New Deal, provides a great example of altruism. Perkins had worked for Franklin Roosevelt when he was governor of New York, and she interviewed with the President-elect Roosevelt for the job of Secretary of Labor. And if she was selected, she would become the first woman cabinet secretary. She presented him a list of items designed to lift the country out of the Depression and said, if you want to do these things, I will come to work for you and we can get them done together. That list became the primary elements of the New Deal, including unemployment relief, public works programs, reforms to child labor laws, workers' compensation programs, and improvements in working conditions, and finally, an old age pension system. I think the next necessary attribute is pragmatism. While never losing sight of their idealism or altruism, public servants need a balanced attitude that is grounded in practical possibilities. Public servants need to be aware of, one, the limits of their organization's fiscal and human resources, two, the authority available to address a public problem, and three, the capacity of their organizations to engage a particular problem. Another necessary attribute is receptivity, the ability to be open-minded, to take in and consider new ideas, weigh their implications, and be willing to implement those that represent improvements over the status quo. These are crucial to making progress inside bureaucracies. Public servants need to run their organizations as a marketplace of ideas in which there is receptivity to new ideas and the best ideas can be adopted. An illustrative example of receptivity is when George Marshall served as Secretary of State. He used a low-key commencement speech at Harvard University to announce plans for a European recovery program, later known as the Marshall Plan. Through that speech, he invited European foreign ministers to help identify the highest priority needs for economic recovery funds made available by the United States. He and his staff worked with the Europeans to define the greatest needs, and he simultaneously began working with Michigan Republican Senator Arthur Vandenberg, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to build a support in Congress and among key American industrial groups. The next necessary attribute, moral courage. This involves the bravery to take action for moral reasons despite the risk of adverse consequences. Robert Kennedy said moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence, yet it is the one essential vital quality for those who seek to change a world which yields most painfully to change. So an example of moral courage is my friend Harry Truman, who with his military advisors worked to keep the Korean War contained within Korean borders so that it did not become a major land war in the Far East and Asia. The commander of American troops, General Douglas MacArthur, repeatedly took actions that attempted to spread the war beyond Korea in direct contradiction of stated American policy. With his advisors in full agreement, Truman had to relieve MacArthur of command and made sure that it was done in a way that his firing was apparent to everyone. MacArthur returned home to a hero's welcome, addressing Congress with his "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away" speech. In firing MacArthur, Truman had stood up for the principle of civilian control of the military, and he withstood the heat for relieving the hero MacArthur of command. While MacArthur was giving that "Old soldiers never die" speech, Truman didn't watch it on television, wasn't present in the chamber. He was in the White House residence taking a nap and having lunch. So there. The next attribute is resilience. Different fields use the term resilience to mean slightly different things. In engineering, it refers to the degree to which a structure or building can return to a baseline state after being disturbed. In ecology, the term connotes an ecosystem's ability to resist being irrevocably degraded. In psychology, it signifies the capacity of an individual to deal effectively with trauma. In business, it is used to mean putting in place backups, for example, of data and resources, to ensure continuous operation in the face of disaster. All these definitions have two common elements: continuity and recovery. One definition of resilience is the capacity of a system, enterprise, or person to maintain its core purpose or integrity in the face of drastically changed circumstances. In short, resilience is the ability to bounce back. So I have two examples of resilience in my book, Ida Wells and Alice Paul. Ida Wells, the African-American journalist and newspaper publisher, reported on repeated instances of lynchings in the southern states after the Civil War. She overcame repeated setbacks like having her newspaper headquarters firebombed in response to her reports of lynchings. She continued her reporting and did 2 speaking tours in Europe to publicize what was happening in post-Civil War America. The suffragist Alice Paul, who pushed the suffrage movement to change its approach from reforming individual state voting laws to a strategy of seeking an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to allow all women to vote. She was arrested repeatedly for demonstrating outside the White House gates, and she was tortured while incarcerated. She persisted in her cause, getting the amendment through the Congress and approved by the necessary number of states. And I have to tell you, you've got to see the movie Iron-Jawed Angels with Hilary Swank for a depiction of Alice Paul's resilience. The last of the necessary attributes is perseverance. Public servants who have perseverance are able to resolutely persist in spite of counter-influences, opposition, or discouragement. Over the course of a public service career, there will be many instances when obstacles will block efforts to change or improve the performance of individuals or organizations. Perseverance can also lead to incremental progress, taking an increment of improvement now with the intention of returning to the same project again for more progress later. Rachel Carson, the author of Silent Spring and the acknowledged mother of the environmental movement, is an example of perseverance. While in the final stages of writing Silent Spring, she was already under attack prior to the book's publication from the pesticide manufacturers who saw the implications of the book for their products. She was also under attack from breast cancer as the book went to publication. Nevertheless, she persisted with her writing and launched the environmental movement in the United States. I will turn again to some words of Robert Kennedy to sum up this section about public service and public servants. The future does not belong to those who are content with today, apathetic toward common problems and their fellow man alike, timid and fearful in the face of new ideas and bold projects. Rather, it will belong to those who can blend passion, reason, and courage in a personal commitment to the ideals and great enterprises of American society. So I'm convinced that public servants can no longer succeed if they remain in their traditional roles of technicians and administrators concerned only with controlling and refining organizational functions and processes. They now need to identify emerging problems and needs, frame new opportunities for their programs and organizations, and reposition those programs to respond effectively. Mark Moore of Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, in his seminal book, Creating Public Value, Strategic Management in Government, describes some roles for public servants. Quote, public managers are explorers who, with the help of others, seek to discover, define, and produce public value. Greater public value can be produced by first increasing the quantity or quality of public services, of public activities per resources expended. Second, by making public organizations better able to identify and respond to citizens' aspirations. Third, by enhancing the fairness with which the public sector organizations operate. And fourth, increasing their continuing capacity to respond and innovate. A conscientious public service that helps lead the nation by addressing its public problems requires managers and leaders who understand and embrace the new imperatives of public management. These new imperatives mean that public managers need to serve as strategists and entrepreneurs, masters of improvisation, champions of effectiveness, reflective practitioners, and stewards of the public interest. So let's discuss each of these new imperatives. The first is the need to be strategists and entrepreneurs. Public managers now need to identify emerging needs and demands, frame new opportunities for their programs, and reposition those programs in their task environment to respond more effectively. Public managers operate in an onrushing stream of public problems that emerge in many forms, such as risks, threats, inequities, conflicts, breakdowns, failures, and inefficiencies, to name a few. These problems compete for a place on the public agenda. Simply put, the formal mandates to which public managers hold title are often inadequate to address these problems, which do not fit neatly into existing laws, programs, and hierarchical organizations. Effective public managers now need to develop the diagnostic skill and discipline to anticipate and identify problems, analyze them and understand their causes and interrelated parts, characterize their severity and urgency, and triage them to set priorities for action. Public managers also need the skill and discipline to devise and implement appropriate responses. To do so, they must first develop a set of tools, such as policies, programs, and capabilities, that can be applied to problems. Second, they must develop the ability to select the appropriate combination of these tools to apply to each problem. Third, they must look beyond the organizational boundaries for partnership opportunities with parties that offer resources, expertise, and authority for solving the problems. And fourth, they must exercise both agility and persistence in implementing solutions and measuring the progress made. The second of the new imperatives is that public servants need to be masters of improvisation. Public managers need a broad perspective not fixed on the status quo. They must be comfortable with constant change, able to function amid significant change, and able to anticipate a wide range of future scenarios. Public managers often find themselves surrounded by ambiguity, and that ambiguity can occur in the following ways. It can be about the problem they're asked to address. It can be about the authority they can bring to bear on the problem. It can be about the resources available over the long term. And finally, it can be about the challenges they will encounter and the difficulties measuring success. Public servants need to develop an appetite for dealing with ambiguity, turning ambiguity from a liability into an asset. In ambiguity lies opportunity, the chance to fill the gaps left by statutory language, better define a public problem, and design tailor-made solutions. Public managers need to be masters at developing adaptive business models that allow programs and organizations to adjust to new circumstances and still produce valuable results. They need to adapt to being conveners, leaders, or members of networks and other collaborative structures that combine resources, expertise, and authority of multiple organizational entities. Such networks offer opportunities for new creative partnerships that can address problems and deliver services more effectively and comprehensively. In doing so, public managers also need to be mindful of the trade-off between the improved capabilities that networks provide and the difficulty of ensuring accountability of the multiple public and private partners in these networks. The third of the new imperatives for public servants is to be champions of effectiveness. Public managers need to be relentless advocates for creating and measuring the results, for creating and measuring results and outcomes. They need to use performance-based management to ensure that their programs and organizations use resources wisely, produce useful activities and quality services, and achieve outcomes that support the mission or purpose for which they were created. The principal tool available to public managers who wish to focus on results and outcomes is a set of meaningful performance indicators. A critical skill for effective public managers is a keen ability to identify, design, and use performance indicators or measures. Effective performance indicators need to be relevant to goals, objectives, and priorities. They need to be transparent, promoting clarity and understanding. They need to be credible, based on complete and accurate data. They need to be functional, encouraging effective and constructive behavior. They need to be feasible or cost-effective, and they need to be comprehensive, addressing all important operational aspects. Most programs have some capacity to count or measure activities or outputs, such as the number of enforcement actions taken by a regulatory agency. Some programs attempt to measure ultimate outcomes, such as improvements in ambient air quality or industrial workplace safety, though the program may be only one influence on these outcomes. Intermediate outcomes, the territory between outputs and ultimate outcomes, holds the greatest promise for achieving performance-based management. These intermediate outcomes, such as reductions or eliminations of non-compliant behavior, have several advantages. First, they provide a more meaningful account of program performance than outputs, offering a more compelling story about program accomplishments for the public and political overseers. Second, in contrast to ultimate outcomes, they directly relate to outputs. Third, measuring them presents fewer technical challenges than measuring ultimate outcomes. And fourth, They manifest more quickly than ultimate outcomes. Fifth and finally, they provide insight for managers and others about whether activities contribute significantly to final outcomes. Identifying, developing, and using performance indicators is an iterative, incremental exercise, really a journey rather than a destination. The benefits for public programs: better control of operations, stronger justifications for scarce budget resources, enhanced understanding of patterns and relationships between activities and outcomes, and clearer demonstration of program effectiveness are well worth the considerable effort to identify, develop, and use performance measures. From my own experience, over a 3-year period, a team of us at EPA, in EPA's compliance and enforcement program, worked with many stakeholders, both inside and outside the agency, to establish a meaningful set of performance measures, including a way of measuring the amount of pounds of pollutants taken out of the environment by enforcement actions. We developed a methodology for calculating the amount of pollution reduced, trained the regional office enforcement attorneys on the methodology, and made pounds of pollution reduced a key criteria in performance reviews of regional enforcement programs. We use these pollution reduced numbers in our meetings with the Office of Management and Budget in their annual budget review of EPA's enforcement program. Instead of just reporting the number of inspections and enforcement actions taken by EPA or state agencies in a particular fiscal year, we could now quantify the pounds of toxic pollutants taken out of the environment as a direct result of EPA and state enforcement actions. A much better story to describe what we had accomplished. The fourth of the new imperatives is that public servants need to be reflective practitioners. Effective public managers continuously examine current practices, reviewing whether procedures and policies still make sense, and evaluating the impact of their programs. They also continuously scan for ideas and approaches, assessing their applicability and potential for improving effectiveness of their programs and organizations. They do not allow the press of day-to-day business to hamper their ability to raise issues about current reality or search for new ideas. Moreover, they create a marketplace of ideas in their organizations and convey constant openness and receptivity to better ways of doing business. Put another way, a reflective practitioner is an individual who believes in learning constantly and updating their knowledge by reflecting on activities done by them in the past. Practitioners should cultivate an active dialogue with academic experts and thought leaders in public management and public policy as sources of fresh thinking. Any gulf between public service practitioners and academicians is unfortunate, as they have much to learn from each other, and both would be strengthened by a closer relationship. Practitioners can improve academicians' relevance, and academicians can help improve practitioners' effectiveness. This conference by the Schaefer Center is a good example of the academic community and practitioners reaching out to each other. Given the magnitude and complexity of public problems the government must address, the public manager's success can no longer be left to ad hoc approaches to learning about supervision, management, and leadership. Instead, public managers need the formal, continuous education other professions, such as doctors and lawyers, use to stay current with developments in their professional field. The last of the new imperatives is that public servants need to be stewards of the public interest. The terms public interest and the common good are lofty and vague concepts, but individual public servants and managers can contribute to them through their day-to-day activities in their particular sphere of public policy and administration. They can objectively view and shape understanding of the nature and causes of public problems and the options for addressing and resolving them. They can ensure balance and fairness in decisions affecting competing and conflicting interests. They can open policy processes for participation in collaborative efforts to make decisions on public issues. They can use public funds and resources prudently and efficiently. Finally, they can embody a passionate commitment to the mission of the organization and serve as a model for its members. Our public discourse is often driven by chronic partisanship and short-term political gain. The tactics of those who practice this type of discourse include fear, distortion, intellectual dishonesty, disinformation, and a cynical brand of simplification that obscures the complex nature of public problems and solutions. Our political culture often glorifies and celebrates individual freedom without regard for the common good, social justice, and the need for shared sacrifice. This situation suggests a broader emerging stewardship role for public servants. In these times, the nation desperately needs citizens who've not lost sight of the public welfare and demand that the public good receives the deference it deserves. Joining these citizens can be public servants who, as they tend to the public good in performing their duties, provide a balancing force or countervailing influence on the excesses and extremes of our public discourse and political culture. They can help form the core of public-spirited citizens who still believe we have obligations to each other, responsibilities to preserve democratic ideals for future generations, and a need to be constructive citizens of the world. So let's discuss for a moment what the future holds for public servants. The public sector is usually called on to address the nation's most serious, sweeping, and intricate problems, and career public servants must devise and take practical steps to identify and implement solutions. The conventional wisdom is that government is broken, a view encouraged by a recent administration's failures to not just solve serious problems, but to launch a wide range of new problems for the public to deal with. Their failures gave new life to the view that government is incapable of addressing even simple tasks and is not set up to meet the challenges of the future. Contrary to that conventional wisdom, government has an impressive record of achievement. I use chapter 6 of my book to detail the greatest of these achievements, including creating the interstate highway system, ensuring safe food and drinking water, promoting financial security and retirement, to name just a few. I recommend to all of you the book by Paul Light called Government's Greatest Achievements. There's no shortage of challenges on the horizon that will be assigned to public servants. Most daunting of all will be the magnitude and complexity of solutions needed to reduce and reverse global climate change, including, first, finding ways to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, second, developing alternative energy from renewable sources, and third, educating people about myriad earth-friendly practices they can use daily to reduce their impact on climate change. And all of these things will need to be done in ways that do not break the bank with exploding deficits that can set the nation back for decades. In the first few pages of my book, I offer a blessing for public servants, and I want to conclude my remarks today with some portions of that blessing. May you be able to work on public issues or problems that you find endlessly fascinating and rewarding, full of opportunities to use yourself for the good of others. May you work with and for people you like and respect, learning and teaching as you travel your journey with them, seeing them learn to achieve together and be recognized for what they create. May you reach the conclusion of your public service career having the satisfaction of knowing that your energy was spent solving public problems, sending out ripples of hope to the nation and the world, and making government more transparent, accessible, and effective. And my last words to you today are, one of the people I've most admired in my life is Bill Bradley, who excelled at two things I loved in my life, basketball and public service. It turned out I didn't have the ankles, knees, and cardiovascular system to sustain a basketball career, but I did have the head and heart for public service. Bill Bradley is the former Democratic senator from New Jersey, former two-time champion professional basketball player with the New York Knicks, NCAA All-American basketball star at Princeton University, Olympic gold medalist, Rhodes Scholar, and the current chairman of the board of directors of the Volcker Alliance, and a native of my home state of Missouri. He offers some guidance about what it means to live a life devoted to serving others. He said, quote, "The tragedy is not to die. The tragedy is to die with commitments undefined, convictions unexpressed, and service unfulfilled." It's been my pleasure to speak to you today to try to give you an even fuller appreciation of the value of public service and give you some ideas you can take with you as you continue your journey in public service. Keep striving and achieving. The nation needs you. Now, here is how to contact me. If you send me an email or a text, I will read and respond in 24 hours. My personal email, smusial06 up there, is an homage to Stan Musial, the St. Louis Cardinals Hall of Fame baseball player. I hope many of you will come to the book signing table where I would be pleased to talk to you and put a personal inscription in your copy of my book. Thank you for listening. Good luck in your public service journey.
Questions? I would. Sure. Michael, I'd like to take a couple of your questions if you have any. Anybody have any questions for Michael? Come on, there you go. Jim.
Michael, you have a power-packed book, obviously, and it's very practical, it's very clear from your presentation, and it's very, very useful. The one thing that struck me, though, was when you defined your public servant, it seemed to me, now maybe I missed it, but it seemed to me that you were really including leaders in various capacities, whether you're a manager or an elected official. Is there anything in your book about just the public servants, as I consider them to be, who work in the various departments, not the leadership of those departments, but who serve and execute the programs, policies, and jobs, quite frankly, that government has to provide for society?
Did everyone hear the question? Okay. I think my remarks today had a lot of focus on public managers, people who are leading government programs, but the book itself is really focused on anybody in public service. You don't have to be a manager to appreciate what's in this book. You can be at the very beginning of your public service career, and I think you'll find valuable things in here. So when I sat down to write it, I was really trying to talk to public service practitioners, whether they were in the early stages of their career, whether they were in mid-level management positions, or even in senior executive service positions. So I think the book attempts to speak to all of those parties. And I also think I'm reflecting a trend that I saw in a lot of public administration literature over the last 15 or so years, where the definition of public servant seems to be getting expanded, as does the definition of public service. So it's not just people in government agencies anymore that are doing the work of governance, and that word governance is kind of a signal of the change I'm talking about, the expansion of these ideas of public servant and public service. So I think maybe what we're talking about here is that my presentation did focus a lot on public managers and people in leadership positions. But I do think that the book as a whole speaks to people even at the very beginnings of their career and who are not in management ranks as yet. But I was also hoped that the book would speak to people who have just started their career and are trying to determine whether they want to be a manager or a leader in a public organization. I think this book can help convince you that that is a noble way to go and a good thing to do. Other questions?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that that's your answer. I figured it was in there. I just think that many leaders, particularly elected officials, but even some managers, don't appreciate the fact that their employees in their various departments are public servants too, and don't necessarily treat them with the same respect that that they're due as a result of the careers that they picked, and they do serve the public day in and day out in very necessary ways.
You know, I spent a lot of my career at EPA serving as deputies to political appointees. And every time you get a change in administrations, all the political appointees that are currently there leave. I don't know where they go, but they all leave. And a new crop of political appointees comes in, and you have to spend time getting them prepped and ready to understand what they hold title to inside the agency and what they can do, and give them ideas about their legacy. There's a section of my book where I talk about briefing people who are coming in as new political appointees and the things that I always tried to cover for them as I gave them initial briefings. And there was always a section of that briefing that was, okay, if you want to do something that will give you a legacy here in this program long after you're gone, you can do the following things. And some of the political appointees followed it and did it. Others just blew it off and went their own way. But I will say that the political appointees that I had the pleasure of working for were almost without exception very dedicated to the public, not wild-eyed ideologues about their particular administration, and were willing to understand and hear from the career public servants about what were the next things that needed to be done. And so I had a pretty good experience with political appointees that I worked for, and that's not something that everybody that worked at EPA during my time there can say. Because we did have some bad political appointees there, and there were some difficult moments with them. But I had a very good experience with them in my own career.
Thank you.
Peter?
Thank you so much for your talk. I look forward to reading the books. It's great. I'd like to know how you came to enter public service.
The question was about how I came to enter public service. I'm thinking back as far as I can to find the roots there. I will tell you that from a young age, I was kind of a public service nerd. My family would go on vacations, and I would take books like The Making of the President, 1960,
Yeah.
or The Making of the President, 1964 or 68. I read them all, and I got a taste for what public service can be like, mostly because Theodore White, the author of all of those Making of the President books, did a great job of describing government as a force for good. And I was convinced after reading those that I wanted to be part of that. Serving in government that was a force for good. So I had to almost cry to get you to applaud. All right. Others?
Anybody else?
You got time?
Roger.
For me, there's certainly periods in American history, and I think we're in one now, where there's such divisiveness among the political branches that public servants who are embedded in agencies, as Jim was noting, are in the middle of political storms. What advice do you have to help public leaders who are doing the day-to-day work kind of survive those periods in time where we are in such great strife?
Did everybody get that question? All right, I see either complete boredom around the audience or nobody shaking heads no. So,
Bad question.
no, I think my experience is that you'll find that when there's a transition to a new administration and a new set of people with new ideas come in, that there are ways to bond with them. And there was only one instance that I had where I worked for a political appointee And I had real trouble finding a way to work with that person and finding a way to serve that person in the best way possible. But for the most part, I could listen to what people were saying as they came into the agency. I could run what I heard from them through the experience of my own program and come back with some ideas for them about here are the things I think you're going to be interested in doing and that need to be done and that can create a legacy for you at this agency. So, you know, I don't have, one thing my book is short on is war stories, because I didn't want this book to be a memoir made up of a bunch of war stories from inside the bureaucracy. Who cares? So I don't have a lot of stories about overcoming or conquering the hostile political appointees. I've tried to find a way to work with them. And in the one instance where I was not able to, that person left before I did. So I outlasted them.
Sometimes prayers are answered, aren't they?
All right. Anybody else? Yeah.
Got a second question. Do you think that the circumstance that social studies and civics, for example, specifically, in our school system across the country, has had any impact on elected officials or on people understanding the opportunities that government could offer?
I absolutely think that the lack of civics courses and the kind of the lack of social studies courses in junior high and high school has made a big difference, not just with respect to the leaders or people going into public service, but for the voters as a whole. Mm-hmm. I think that's where the United States has broken down, by giving up on requiring civics to be taught in 8th grade or wherever you're going to put it. By giving that up, they have made an electorate that is considerably, I'll just say it, considerably dumber than electorates of the past, and they have made people not very sensitive to public issues or very understanding of the different aspects of a public issue. I remember, and I'm going way back here, I remember in 8th grade being told I was going to have to take a civics class, and I was like, for what? But I took it, and I really liked it. I mean, I learned about the legislature, I learned about all kinds of things, and when I went to work early in my career, while I was in graduate school for the Missouri Senate, I hearkened back to some of the things I learned in that 8th grade civics class while I was watching the Missouri Senate do what it does or doesn't do. But I think the lack of those civics, the lack of civics education is a major problem and is only going to get worse unless we remedy that situation somehow.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Okay, thanks.
Let's give a round of applause